stands for Cross-Regional Opportunities Improving Social Cohesion. We wanted to look at two regions, one in France and one in the UK, and see if we could improve the cohesion and all of the other aspects that go along with that in both those areas. Croire literally means to believe in French. I think I've said that enough times now that that's correct, and I'm not going to get told off for that. So this was a European project. It's funded by Interreg for a cross-channel programme and selected for funding within the European Regional Development Fund. We had a number of partners, as you can see. Greenwich were the lead partner. In France, our lead partner we're joined by as well was France Business School, Amiens campus. And within that we had two schools in the UK. So we worked within Sittingbourne Community College and the Isle of Sheppey Academy in the UK, in the Swale area. And we worked in Ligy Jean-Baptiste de Londres and Collège César Franck in France, in Amiens, in the region where we were looking at. And we chose these two regions because they were particularly similar in terms of their proportion of disadvantaged young people living within those areas. We also were very lucky to have some other partners involved in the project as well. We had Kent County Council, Educational Psychology Services were involved in the project in the UK, and we had Charlton Athletic Community Trust, and they kindly provided a lot of the sports activities that we used with the children to encourage cohesion and aspirations. We also had Swale Borough Council in the UK, who were really helpful because they helped us in terms of, we were looking at both of the two regions, so they were sort of showing us the children some of the highlights of where they live, so they could be proud of where they came from. In France, we also had an association, MDR, which is also a charity. They were involved in the project, and they essentially put young people, so sort of student-age ambassador type mentors, to sort of use the lingo that we would use in the UK, and they go into schools and where there's these particular schools where children are less likely to go on to university and try and encourage them to raise up. So as I mentioned, this project was eligible for funding because we were looking at two regions that were selected within the Interreg 4A funding stream. So we worked within Kent and within the Somme region. Lots of objectives in CRA, but just basically to say that the main aim of the project was to identify a cross-border approach to identify ways to improve aspirations, improve language, cultural perceptions of both a different culture and their own culture, sense of belonging within the community, perception of heritage and environment, and hopefully with all of those things combined with this sort of positive cooperation, we'd also improve aspirations. We did this a number of ways, but essentially we had mentors went into schools. Mentors were ambassadors from the University of Greenwich, or they were ambassadors from France Business School, and they went into schools, talked to students, did various activities with them. There was about 6. So it was a cross-border project. We had lots and lots of partners involved in the project, of which Greenwich was the lead partner. Our lead in France was France Business School Amiens campus. My colleague Christophe Wells is from France Business School.
Hello, I'm the Director of Development at the Amiens campus of France Business School. I'm also in charge of all European programmes and Erasmus. Amiens is an interesting place because, of course, the Somme is well known to all British people because of the First World War. If you say Somme to somebody, they'll say you know where it is. Amiens, however, nobody will know where it is. It's a small town, 130,000 people, very diverse. You have some very middle-class, wealthy areas, and you have two of the most socially deprived areas in northern France. One of those is called Étouré, another one is called Amiens Nord, which for those of you who speak French is North Amiens. Less than 1 person in 20 goes on to higher education from North Amiens. There is a 45% unemployment rate in young people aged 18 to 25. It's not a nice place to be. So we thought this was a place which was worthwhile getting involved in this project and trying to make a difference. How much of a difference did the project actually make? Well, as Amy said, the project actually means to believe. And the idea is for these students to say, right, why do I bother going to school? Because I'll come out of school, I may have qualifications, I still won't get a job. The big battle is persuading young people that qualifications do mean something, that working in school can make a difference, that actually listening in class or behaving in class, and obviously with today's theme of pupil behaviour, is something that can help them in the future. This is an everyday, ongoing battle. We organise parents' meetings for the pupils who are involved in this project, 80 pupils in all over 2 years. We had 11 parents, I don't say sets of parents, 11 parents attended those 4 meetings. This project too, well first of all, of course, it brought into contact with these young people, people who are in a business school, who have done their degree, who are doing their master's degree, and will go on, hopefully, or they hope certainly, to good jobs. That contact can actually help people. And we found that one person out of the 80 comes into us regularly and says, I'm now working hard on top of my class, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to study law. We have 2 other people out of the 80 who again have kept regular contacts with our tutors, our students who went into these schools and met with the pupils on a monthly basis and saying, we're going to come to your school because we have bursaries, a system of bursaries, which allow students from disadvantaged areas to come into a business school where they normally pay fees because you use areas to come in. You might think that 3 people out of this 80 who have come to our university or to our tutors and said, this has made a difference to us. We want to achieve, we want to go on to higher education. Isn't very much. But 3 people is better than no people. Now Europe might say, well, we've invested a lot of money in this project. Is that something that's worthwhile? Well, hopefully, because this project may give birth to similar projects in the future, which again may have even greater influence.
And I tend to do research on aggressive behaviour, and I'm going to talk to you today about some of the work we've done looking at aggressive behaviour among children when they're first starting school. Look at this. Well, we know from the literature and we know from reports in the press and speaking to children that bullying is a serious problem. And starting school or preschool is really, for most children, the first time that they come into regular, kind of organised, daily contact with children of their own age, with their peer group. The definition of bullying, Smith and Sharp have called it a systematic abuse of power. And that ties in really with David Farrington's definition. So he's saying it's aggressive behaviour, and that's quite general, that's quite broad. It could be physical, but it could be psychological as well. It has to have that intention where you want to hurt someone, and it has the desired effect on the victim. We developed a participant roles interview. So it's an individual interview technique, and from this you can get peer nominations, you can get self-nominations, and we also used a teacher report version as well. And encompasses 4 different types of aggression. We show the children a picture, and this one is supposed to be somebody hitting someone else. So you say to the child, you know, what do you think is happening there? And they might say, I think somebody's hitting someone. You go, yes, that's right, and explain it to them. And you can get peer nominations and self-nominations for that. So we've got physical aggression, we've got someone saying nasty things to somebody. You can see here, they're talking about somebody behind their back. And this one they're saying, no, you can't join in, you can't play with us, so social exclusion. So we use this kind of methodology, these cartoons, to help children to talk to us about what was happening and what they knew was going on within their class. When we look at gender differences, we found that the boys were more likely likely to use and experience more physical types of victimisation, and that the girls were more likely to use and experience relational types of victimisation. So these are the roles taken in victimisation in these 4 countries that we looked at. So we've got the role of the aggressor, the role of the victim, defender. We also looked at children who were quite pro-social, children who stood up for other children when they were being victimised, maybe by telling someone what was going on, or telling the aggressive kid to stop it, or just comforting the victim afterwards. That some children are being identified as behaving aggressively, some children are being identified as being the targets of that aggression. But happily, some children are also being identified as being quite positive and quite pro-social as well. What we found was that the boys were more likely than the girls to be identified as behaving aggressively, and that the girls were more likely than the boys to be identified as behaving pro-socially and defending. Now, I think that is a little bit unfair, because I think some of the ways in which we measured defending behaviour perhaps more likely to be carried out by girls. We did come out, which was quite different, was this idea of stability of the roles. Now, looking at this with our young sample, we only looked at it over a 4-month interval. And what we've got here are the correlation coefficients between the level of nominations that they receive for each of the behaviours at the first time point and then 4 months later. And what you can see is there's significant correlation here for aggression. So the children who are receiving quite high nominations for aggression at the first time point still receive quite high levels of nominations for aggression at the second time point. So their peers were saying, you know, this kid's still behaving aggressively. And defender, this was significant as well. So children who were behaving pro-socially at the first time point were still identified as being pro-social at the second time point. But interestingly, the victim role didn't seem to be stable. And if you look, well, if it could be that some children who are, tend to behave aggressively are behaving aggressively to a variety of different children during the early years at school. And in Germany, led by Mechtel Schaefer, have suggested also that the dominance hierarchies among younger children are quite unstable. That, you know, one day one child's the top dog, another day someone else is. So things are moving and quite fluid during early childhood. And so it may be that if you are victimised by your peers, it may be easier for you to escape from being labelled as a victim and being continually victimised in that way. So, because things are so fluid and changeable. Well, it looks like, peer victimisation is occurring during these early years at school. It doesn't suggest that it may be important to start thinking about putting in place intervention and prevention work with children when they're first starting school. It may be children's behaviour and the way in which they think they should be interacting with others at this early stage, before it becomes kind of a part of your normal repertoire, then this may be more effective. It's a growing area of research, but as I would say, more research is needed, and I think in particular we need longitudinal research to really see what's happening and how we can help children to avoid continued victimisation. Okay. And I'm responsible for a module which addresses behaviour in the classroom. Lifelong learning, as some of you may know, is a euphemism in this country at the moment for further education. So just to clarify, I'm concerned with training people who are working with teenagers aged 14 to 19 in colleges or training centres. The sector is called lifelong learning, and in common with all PGCEs, our training is split between university study and being in the classroom. There's a great deal that students pick up and are concerned with in the classroom, just kind of crisis managing and learning from the cultures of the places
where they do their teaching experience, which we have a tangential relationship to. We teach the theory of some principles of behaviour management and some principles of how to look at the emotional content of learning. But a great deal that goes on is outside of our direct reach, and this of course is in common with all teacher training programmes and a dilemma. On this programme we make an assumption that adolescence is a really critical period of time in students' development, and that it's a sort of discrete period of time where there are all sorts of challenges for students about the formation of their identity and their independence, and that these, of course, impinge on and are intrinsic to the way that students at this age learn. Our students are most anxious about this aspect of training. How will I cope? What will I do if my 18, 17-year-olds are abusive to me? What will I do if they don't bring in their homework? What will I do if they keep putting their phones on? What will I do if I think they're, dealing drugs in the back of the classroom? How will I cope if they're sneering at me? So this is something that students are terribly anxious about and place a high value on. And our students tend to love role play and modelling, and they like looking at classrooms. They like looking at exemplars of filmed incidents and discussing what happened next, etc. We do talk a lot about theory, but the one theory that I've found students really value is transactional analysis. I don't know how, basically, that within us all we have an adult, a parent and a child, and the teacher is often the parental figure. Once you start finger wagging, you put the student in the position of the child and you have perhaps a conflict. What you want to do with teenagers is get to an adult-adult interaction where you're dealing with a problem rather than a person perceived as a problem. Lots of tensions in teaching this course, in the teaching and learning that goes on, and I just wanted to share with you what I believe they are. There's a tension between how far we describe behavioural management and how far we explore the emotional aspects of learning. And students often get frustrated and say, just tell me what to do, I can't consider it any further, just tell me how to manage this difficult student. And there's an element of frustration for students when they're coming across this aspect of learning. For our students in terms of dealing with groups of people and dealing with individuals. I have had students on more than one occasion describe their teenage students as pack animals. They're all pack animals. You get the leader, it'll be okay, I'll manage them, I'll corral them. Of course, once you start thinking of people en masse, then you miss the individual aspects of learning, which we know are so important for us to attend to. Moved into a deregulated world in lifelong learning teacher education. We've only had 6 years of being a regulated profession, and that's gone from next year. So we have the possibility of redesigning our PGCE and redesigning what we do around managing behaviour. And the organising principle for this is going to be 3 themes. We're going to look at inclusion and communication along with behaviour management. So we're hoping to sort of broaden the base of what we're sharing with our students. Hoping to sort of move as far as possible as we can from casting the students as the problem into looking at how do you include people in your classroom, what are the barriers to learning, what are some of the particular needs of students with some definable conditions, if you like, and I'm thinking here perhaps of ADHD, that might be an example. What can we teach our students that will be more effective, more real? How can we sort of bring alive these experiences that people are having in the classroom into a PGCE? How do we keep pace with the issues of technology? I mean, on the skills of our beginner teachers, I've indicated we've got a lot of people who are in their 30s. How can we use what they have and what they already know when they come to us with rich experience, but perhaps are struggling to change roles? And we're doing all of this with the sort of politics of control and the expectations of places that we're training for really changing, and the standards of behaviour and what academies perhaps want our teachers to be trained to do, what sixth forms want our teachers to be trained to do, the needs of more traditional FE colleges and the rise of private training sectors offers a whole load of, I'm sorry, it's that dreadfully overused word, challenges in terms of how we can make most effective use of the short time that we have to prepare our students to manage teenagers.